Hey, Changemaker! Welcome to Learning for Good, the only podcast that teaches nonprofit leaders how to leverage training to drive performance, improve capacity, and fuel their mission impact. Do you ever feel like your nonprofit is growing, but your people just aren't keeping up? Or like you're fixing the same problems over and over? Do you wonder how to build confident, capable staff who know how to lead, not just execute? If we haven't met yet, I'm Heather, and I know how hard it can feel to get people to do what's expected of them. Trust me, I have 3 kids. I've tried telling people what to do and how. I've tried the traditional training approaches, and I realized that just doesn't work. And that's when I started researching what does work. Now, I help mission-driven leaders use learning to drive performance, build capacity, and make change that lasts. And I'm sharing it all on this podcast. So block your calendar, turn off your Teams or Slack chat, and let's dive in. It's Learning for Good.
If you've been around the podcast or my LinkedIn for a while, you know how much I love behavior change. It's quite honestly a missing piece in so much of what we do in learning and development. We talk a lot about how people learn. We talk a lot about engagement. We talk a lot about skills. But at the end of the day, we also want to change behavior. So for me, when I'm working with clients, I'm always looking for the behavior change. And I'm applying behavior change principles to my work. When I design a training or a different solution, I'm thinking about how people actually change. How will they know when to do the thing that we need them to do? Do they want to do it? And if not, what would make them want to do it? Can they implement it? Is there a routine, environment, culture set up to allow them to do the thing we need them to do? And do they have the skills they need? And also, what's the reward? Why would they do this? What's the feedback loop? How will they feel successful? How do we close that loop for people as they're making behavior changes? I'm thinking about all of this when I design learning. So when I met Amy Glover from the British Red Cross, and she shared how they use habit stacking to improve feedback skills, I was hooked. I knew we had to bring this conversation to the podcast. It's going to be so good, and I can't wait. Let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. Amy Glover is a coach, facilitator, and 5DI accredited learning designer crafting transformational learning experiences that spark real behavioral change. She brings infectious energy, theatricality, and a healthy dose of humor to every project because learning should be memorable, not monotonous. From future-proof management training to strategic capability building, Amy designs with outcomes in mind and people at heart. In addition to her role as Learning and Development Manager at the British Red Cross, Amy co-chairs the Carers Network at the British Red Cross, and she's the trustee for the charity Home Start, which supports young families facing difficulties in Glasgow and North Lanarkshire. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Heather. It's lovely to see you. Great to be here.
I'm excited to have this conversation with you. I know we met before, I think we met on LinkedIn and had a conversation previously about some of the work that you've done related to building feedback skills within your organization and related to behavior change. I know this is also something that you care deeply about. And as soon as we talked, I knew that we had to bring this to the podcast. It's just such a great example of how you are thinking about learning and how you're using behavior change principles to really impact your organization. So thank you for agreeing to join me today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm really excited about it. Any chat about behavior change and I'm there. I love talking about it. I find it so interesting. And meeting of minds here.
Absolutely. So before we jump in and we get deep into behavior change, I do want to hear a little bit about your career journey. How did you get where you are today? What does that path look like for you? I feel like some people, they know right away this is what they want to do. They go to school for it and they take that path, and others kind of fall into the field of learning and development. So tell us a little bit about your career journey. How did you get here?
Sure. Yeah, I'm definitely in the second category for sure. I have quite an unconventional route into L&D. So I actually started out training as an opera singer. back in the day, I did a music degree and I was quite good, but not that good. So it quickly became apparent that this was not going to be the career for me. So I went into classical music management instead, doing touring productions. I worked for the BBC for a while, broadcasting, National Theatre of Scotland. But I did that for 10 years, but it wasn't compatible with having small children. So that was my first kind of veering off into a new route. And I set up my own business teaching preschool music. So you can see we're getting a little bit closer to L&D, but still quite far from where I am now. I was hugely passionate around supporting new parents. I was a relatively new parent myself at that time. But of course, big bad COVID came along. Business collapsed overnight. And I found myself sitting at home with my son about to start school and my new baby daughter thinking, what on earth am I going to do with my life? A friend who worked for a small charity called Young Enterprise Scotland said, do you know what? There's quite a junior job going here in volunteering. I think you'd be really good at it. Why don't you apply? Applied, I got it, and very quickly discovered I really loved working in the third sector. I loved working with volunteers, and I really loved developing learning. So I started out developing learning for volunteers and then moved into working in management and capability as well. I worked with an amazing lady called Lynn Gray, who was an L&D manager, and she was the first person to say, you know, you're actually really good at this. You can do this. You don't have the qualifications. You're not a coach, you're not a facilitator, but actually this is something that comes naturally to you. And I was hooked. So it's an unconventional route, but everything I've done up to this point has informed my approach to learning, my approach to behavior change, how I bring in these different aspects of my life, my history, to make learning a little bit different sometimes.
Yeah, I love to hear people's career journeys because I found that to be so true. The things that we do, the experiences that we have, all lead us to a slightly different place, a slightly different lens that we bring to our work. And so I think it's so fascinating how you ended up where you are. Now, I know we are talking specifically about feedback skills. I know that you've probably done a lot more work than just that, but we wanted to highlight this particular project. So let's start at the beginning for this particular project that you have in mind. You needed to improve feedback skills. We'll start there. Who was the audience for this, and how did you uncover this need?
So the audience was people managers at the British Red Cross. So there are about 800 of them, staff who are managing other staff. And there'd been a huge piece of work delving into why people managers lacked the confidence and capability to do that part of their jobs, the people management part. And what came out loud and clear was that at the British Red Cross, where we are all driven by helping people and compassion and humanity, we are really, really uncomfortable when it comes to driving performance because we care so much about other people's feelings and well-being that we will shy away from those crunchy conversations, and in particular, anything around feedback. So it jumped out, that piece of work, as being a priority area.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I definitely don't think you're the only nonprofit that is struggling with feedback skills in particular, because there is a little bit of this niceness, for lack of a better word, right? There's this care that we bring to our work in the sector, and feedback isn't always comfortable. Even though feedback can be caring, it's not always comfortable. And so it doesn't always feel like it aligns with how we want to be and who we want to be within our organizations. So there is a little bit of a disconnect, a little bit of tension there that you have to work through. Tell us a little bit about, as you started to untangle all of these pieces and figure out what was holding people back and what you needed people to do, what was your approach to improving feedback skills? And I know we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about habit stacking in our conversation, but this was part of a larger solution that you put together. So help us understand your approach and what that whole solution looked like.
Yeah, so we were not long out of Learning at Work week, which had gone really well. Higher attendance than usual. There was a real thirst for that intensive learning experience to happen again. There was a real buzz around learning. And when you do something intensive like that in just 1 week, it makes it a little bit easier to market. So we, off the back of that, we're going, could we do a learning week that was just around one of these capability areas? And the whole Feedback in Action, it was called, the learning week that came out of it, stemmed from a story I told about when I was learning to drive and I got incredibly stressed out about stalling the car. I would burst into tears every time I stalled the car, right? And my driving instructor's solution was to make me drive to a quiet road and stall the car over and over again until I no longer felt uncomfortable. And I said, could we do that with feedback? Could we plunge people into a learning intervention so intensive and put them into so many situations where they need to give feedback that they're no longer uncomfortable, that it becomes part of the day-to-day? So that was where Feedback in Action Week came from. And it was workshops, coaching surgeries, daily email nudges to embed learning in the flow of work. And we covered radical candor, the SBI model. We got people giving us real-time feedback on our facilitations right there and then in the middle of a workshop. Right, give us feedback. What have you seen? What could be better? We gave them fictional, high-pressure tasks like agreeing how to escape a desert island so that they could give each other feedback afterwards on how they tackled the task. And we had a lot of laughs. So the colleague I worked with, the wonderful Becky Legg, also comes from a theatrical background. So we were really comfortable role-playing a few really cringe-worthy feedback conversations to get learners unpicking what went wrong and then coaching us on how to do them again better. One of the things I firmly believe in is that role-play is so uncomfortable for people to do that they can't learn from it because they're so paralyzed with fear at having to be put in that situation. They will not learn from the experience. Whereas watching us do it, that voyeurism of, oh, look at them doing it and isn't it uncomfortable? Really powerful learning experience.
Yeah, it's almost like the fishbowl effect, right? Except instead of bringing volunteers to the front of the room, you all were able to do that kind of on their behalf, and they were able to watch and give that feedback. So you covered a lot in a very short answer there, around your approach to feedback skills. So it became kind of this week-long intensive with workshops, and you mentioned email learning nudges and lots of practice, lots of role play, different scenarios. Some, it sounds like, were definitely not work related, like escaping the desert island, but gave them the opportunity to practice that feedback. Were any of the scenarios and things also work related? Were they all kind of meant to take them outside of the box? What did that look like? Or was there a balance there?
Yeah, we did have a balance. I would say it was predominantly work related. The ones that weren't were very much about that stalling the car experience of getting people comfortable, giving feedback in a situation that was low stakes. You know, if you're giving feedback on whether you chose the right item to help you get off a desert island, you know, this is super low stakes. We did do a lot of scenarios. So we did your classic giving feedback in an appraisal, an end of year conversation. We did feedback after a presentation. One thing, I did some really rapid iteration during the week because one thing that came out of the on the spot feedback that we were asking for is that a pain point for a lot of people was peer-to-peer feedback. I had assumed it would be direct report, giving feedback to a direct report, but what people said they found really hard was peer-to-peer because there just wasn't a culture of doing that. So yeah, midweek we were like, right, how can we come up with a role play for us to demo effective peer-to-peer using radical candor or whatever and get people to put themselves in that seat.
Yeah, I love that. It's almost like giving them something that feels safe at first because it's not necessarily work related and it's kind of extreme and gets them out of their comfort zone. They get comfortable with that and move them a little bit closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer to what they're actually going to experience in their work environment. So lots going on, lots going into this particular learning intensive, right? Let's explore the habit stacking piece of this a little bit, because at the end of the day, even with the best learning experience, they're going back into their workplace and they're going back into their regular environment. And it's easy to kind of fall back on those habits. And even the best learning, right? Even when you feel very motivated in the moment of that experience, when you're back in your day to day, there are a lot of other factors at play. And so how do you actually change that behavior in the work environment? And so that's where habit stacking a lot of times is helpful. And so tell us a little bit about, how did you do that? What did it look like? How do you decide to even add that element? Like, why was that even a consideration for you? Walk us through the habit stacking piece of this.
Yeah, so motivation's fickle, basically, is what you're saying, right? We can be absolutely determined, motivated to go to the gym, but then it fades over time. So I was looking at ways to not so much give people the goal of improving feedback, but to give them systems to remove that friction, give them systems that make it easy to achieve that goal. So I'd not long read the wonderful book Atomic Habits by James Clear, which a lot of listeners will know. It's covers more using habit stacking in your personal life. So I've used it to improve my healthy habits, right? I think you and I first got discussing this because we were talking about the gym and fitness and habit stacking in the context of fitness. But I was thinking, how L&D gets landed with behavior change asks that no one really wants to do. Quite often it's, hey, L&D, could you fix the fact that people don't want to have difficult conversations? They don't want to do feedback. They don't want to do data protection. It's always make people do something that they don't want to do. So I was thinking, well, that habit stacking fits this perfectly, right? It's a system where you pair a new behavior with an existing one. So theoretically, if we can get people pairing their feedback habit with habits they're already doing that can trigger them or be anchors to the new behavior, like deciding, I really should floss my teeth, so I'll do it right after I brush my teeth, right? Anchor it to the previous behavior. I thought that would work really well with soft skills, where the challenge is remembering to act in the moment, right? You need to be ready to do it there and then and not put it off. And that formula of after I do this habit I already have, I will do this new habit I want to have, I will give or invite feedback, seemed to make sense to me. So in the training, I was using examples like, after I send a project update email, I will ask, is there anything I could do differently next time? We were focusing on asking for feedback as well as giving. Or after every one-to-one with my direct report, I will offer one piece of positive or developmental feedback, like making those commitments. And I used an example I love about a guy who kept marbles in one of his pockets. And every time he gave a piece of feedback to someone, he would remove a marble from the pocket on the right-hand side to the pocket on the left, with the goal that by the end of the day, the marbles were all in the left pocket. So he gamified it, essentially. Again, removing the friction, making it something that's fun to do. So when it came to demonstrating how to bring this to life, make these new habits stick, because James Clear talks about 4 things: make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. It's the last one. So when you're making it obvious, it's about making it impossible for you to not do it, stacking your feedback habit onto a behavior or trigger so that you cannot possibly forget it or avoid it. After I finish this meeting, I'll give one piece of feedback, or using visual prompts like Post-its or calendar pop-ups. And then if you're making it attractive, the more attractive an opportunity is, the more likely it is to become habit forming. That's why we have so many bad habits, because they're so attractive. But habits are dopamine driven. So when the dopamine drive rises, so does our motivation to act. Our anticipation of the reward gets us to take action. And the greater the anticipation, the greater the dopamine spike. So you want to pair an action you want to do with an action you need to do. So I'll send a Teams message with some feedback before I make my first coffee. There you go, there's your attraction. Or gamify it, as I said, the chat with the marbles. And then for make it easy, it's that lower the friction. It's making it as simple as possible to perform your new habit, remove obstacles, simplify the task. So that might mean starting out with just micro feedback, quick comment in a Teams chat, doesn't have to be a scheduled meeting. Or keeping it low stakes, nothing that's going to lead to a huge debate or awkwardness, and keep a stash of stock phrases up your sleeve. So you've got that shared language for feedback, right? That makes it easy. And then make it satisfying, that like the human brain prioritizes immediate reward over delayed reward. So to make a habit stick, you've got to feel immediately successful, like it was worth doing, even in a small way. So I encourage people to track their feedback moments, notice the positive impact, and reward yourself for doing it. And we, as part of one of the workshops, got people doing a build your feedback habit template. So committing to a template of how they were going to implement this.
Do you wish you could connect with other nonprofit learning and development leaders? I know what it feels like to want someone to bounce ideas off of and to learn from, someone who really understands you and your work. Imagine if you could have a simple way to meet people in the field, ask questions, and share information. That's why I created the Nonprofit Learning and Development Collective, where nonprofit L&D, talent management, and DEI leaders can connect with each other quickly and easily in a virtual space. When you join this community, you will walk away with a new, diverse, and powerful network and a sounding board for your staff development needs. So if you're ready to exchange ideas and collaborate with your peers, come join the Nonprofit L&D Collective.
There's so much that you just unpacked for us. And I really appreciate that you're bringing in James Clear as well, because as you know, I'm a big fan of Atomic Habits. So when you think about the habit stacking, right, you were able to really lean on some of those behavior change principles. And also, it sounds like add some flexibility for people as they were thinking about how they implement it on their own, right? When we think about training, a lot of times specifically, we think about learning at scale and everybody's getting really more or less the same thing. And even with personalized learning journeys, there's still some standardization that happens. And when you think that's great, right? It helps people learn. It helps you when you're thinking about fidelity and quality across an organization. But when you think about behavior change, that's a very individual thing. And so it sounds like you had a lot of flexibility in how people were able to approach habit stacking as they were making this individual behavior change. And would you say that's correct?
Yeah. We gave people lots of options. It was like a menu of these are all the different ways that you can bring in habits. And that also comes with my fitness fanatic head on, because whenever I'm trying to encourage other people to get into the world of fitness, I'm saying, yeah, I go to the gym at 6 a.m., but that's because I'm an early riser and I love it and it suits me. If you're not a 6 a.m. person, do not go to the gym at 6 a.m. Go in the evening, go at lunchtime, find your thing that works for you. That will be frictionless, that you will be able to incorporate with minimum effort, that will be satisfying and easy and all those other things.
Yeah. No, you're reminding me, this is total sidetrack, but I saw a meme yesterday that was like, fitness is easy. If you like lifting heavy weights, do CrossFit. If you like Pilates, do CrossFit. If you like yoga, do CrossFit. If you like to run, do CrossFit. Anyway, it just cracked me up because there are things, right? There are things about CrossFit that work, which is why this meme is funny. But there's also this individual piece of what are you going to stick with? And at the end of the day, you need to do things that you're going to stick with, because if you're forcing yourself to do something that you don't enjoy, or that doesn't fit with your routine, or it doesn't fit with the culture, you're not going to likely stick with it. So I love that you gave that flexibility and how they approached implementing this as a habit, whether it was the gamifying approach that you mentioned with the marbles, or whether it was stacking it with something else that they really wanted to do. They had to do this first to get that thing they wanted, like that cup of coffee, keeping things really simple and easy for them. So it felt more approachable. That's an easy way to build a habit. And really thinking about too, I think this is a piece that's missing in a lot of learning experiences specifically, but I think for all of us trying to change habits and more generally as well, helping people feel successful. That's something that it's hard as a learning designer to think through that piece of things. How are we going to help people feel like they've been successful? How are we going to make sure they're getting that feedback loop closed? Whether that is, their own reflection of how they're doing, or whether that's some kind of external acknowledgement of how they're doing. People need to feel successful if they're going to keep going. And so I love that you also built that in as an option for them to track those feedback moments, to take the time to reflect and notice that positive impact, and to figure out a way to reward themselves for doing that work, because it is work to change behavior. It is not, snap of the fingers or more people would do it. So I really appreciate your approach to habit stacking in this context.
I think also it's something that everyone finds hard, right? And that helped with that buy-in to get everyone to go, right, let's get on board with this and all commit to doing this hard thing. We'll find our own ways of doing it. But there was no one sitting there going, oh, feedback's a breeze, right? Everyone finds it hard. But yeah, I think something you said there just reminded me of push-pull learning that Nick Shackleton-Jones talks about. That you mentioned my 5DI accreditation at the start, that he's who I trained with. And he talks about push-pull learning where you've got pull learning where people already care about the thing you're trying to teach them. And so you don't really need to do much more than give them a resource, because they'll go and find a YouTube video on it, right? They're fine. And then you've got push learning where no one wants to do it. And it's a bit like I said, that they dump that behavior change on L&D and say, can you make people learn this thing? And that's where you need to bring in the emotional significance, all these tricks, this toolbox of things that, yeah, but you can feel good while you're doing it. And hey, here's the benefits. And let me sell you why this is going to change your life.
Yeah, I think we do more sales than we realize at L&D. So once you got through this process, you implemented this intensive learning week around feedback skills, you worked with people on the habit stacking, everything is implemented. what have you learned since then? Do you have any data or have you received any feedback about how it's been working?
Well, yes, we do have a lot of feedback. We went out of our way to get feedback during the week, as I said, so we could do rapid iteration, but also because this was such a new intervention and we hadn't done anything like this before, we really needed to know, does it work? Can we roll this out for other capabilities? The stats at the time were great. Like 3/4 of the respondents said that they walked away with a plan for how to apply what they'd learned within the next 2 weeks, which is what we wanted, right? People to actually know how they were going to do it, not to just walk away and go, no, I really want to get better at feedback. They had a piece of paper that said, and this is how I'm going to do it. And lovely quotes. There was one person who said, I'm taking some practical approaches away from this session, and it started a fire in my belly about improving my feedback. But it was that practical element that I think people appreciated. That we were not just telling them, you need to get better at feedback. We were showing them how. And so what's come out of it, we are about to start looking at evaluating behavior change 6 months on, because it's been 6 months since we did the interventions. Also, we will have just had the end of year appraisals. So come January is the perfect time to say, and how did you use those skills? And all of the workshops have now been condensed into one super workshop that's running as part of our core management offer. Probably the biggest thing that I've seen is a slight culture shift towards thinking that these topics don't have to be dry or scary or things to avoid, that there's more of a willingness now. There's people coming to other workshops on coaching or performance conversations saying, oh, well, I loved your feedback workshop. So, I didn't know that learning could be like that. So now I'm trying other things. So I think what we're seeing is a bit of a shift there towards people taking up more of our offer.
Yeah, I love that. The culture shift is sometimes the hardest piece, right? So not only are you seeing good results from the training itself, but you're also seeing something larger start to shift in the organization, which is huge. So for learning and development pros who are wondering, can they do this? Can they leverage behavior change techniques like habit stacking? What would you tell them? What advice would you give them? Where should they start? Maybe just some final words for people who are more curious now and ready to go think about their learning differently.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is go to LinkedIn and follow a guy called Matt Furness, who runs a company called Click. And he is, in my mind, the authority on behavior change. He's a behavioral scientist, but he's particularly working in the learning and development field. He wrote a blueprint for bottom line L&D, 5 shifts that will take L&D from nice to have to a business priority. And he created an AI tool called Sticky, which will help you design your learning intervention using behavioral science to help it stick. And he's taught me a lot of what I know, definitely. He is so accessible, so charismatic. He has so many free resources on his website and often posts great content in LinkedIn. If you're interested in behavior change and how you can apply it in L&D, he is your guy.
Yeah, Matt is a great follow. I would echo that for sure. All right. This has been such a great conversation, Amy. I love hearing how people are implementing learning in general, but when they're implementing with this behavior change lens, I think it's even more exciting to dig in and see what you're doing that may be just slightly different than what somebody else is doing that can have such a huge impact. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you for sharing what you guys are up to and your approach to behavior change and learning at the Bridge Press.
Oh, you're welcome, Heather. It's been so good to talk to you. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
There's so much I love about this conversation with Amy, but I think one of the things that stands out is that this is so approachable. It sometimes feels like behavior change, oh, that's something else, or that's not my job, or I don't know how I would do that within the context of my organization. And yet, Amy found a way to do this within her organization and with a skill set that is needed in every organization and is often a challenge in every organization. And she was able to find a way to not just build the skill, but also to create that change for individuals across the organization. So this is 100% doable. It's 100% approachable. And I'm so glad that Amy joined me today to have this conversation, to share what they did, and hopefully to inspire you. I know she inspired me as we think about how we can create behavior change through learning. That's it for today. I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.
Hey friend, was this episode helpful for you? Did you like what you heard? Do you want more content like this? Here are 3 things you can do. Hit subscribe. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Share this episode with a colleague. This means so much to me personally. I read every review, but it also helps me learn what content you like most so I can create more of what you want. All right, turn that Teams or Slack chat back on when you're ready, and I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.